All right. So today's session is the day in the life of an ML engineer in FAANG. I'm going to be your instructor for the session. My name is Jay Pillai. Before we start, I want the session to be very interactive. So if you have questions, feel free to stop me at any point. I will also ask some questions in between so that it's interactive. All right, let's get started. So yeah, quick introduction about myself. My name is Jay Pillai. I am currently a senior engineering manager in the AI/ML org in Apple. So currently, I lead a few teams which build AI and machine learning models in a bunch of products in Apple, all the way from camera, photos, iMessage, maps, and so on. I'm also an interview Kickstart instructor and course creator. On the side, I also mentor engineers who are like new to the career and also fresh graduate students. Previously, before I started at Apple around 4 years back, I was an engineering manager at Google DeepMind. I also spent some time as a staff engineer at Google Research. Also was at Amazon for a short time right after my grad studies. I also did my PhD in machine learning from University of Maryland long back in 2013, before ML was popular and hot and everything. If you want, you can feel free to follow me in LinkedIn too. So again, before we start the session, try to make it interactive. So if you have questions, maybe like raise your hand. You could also like ask in the Q&A session, and then I'm happy to like answer those as well. So first of all, we want to start looking at the responsibilities of an ML engineer. So let's say you take the programs which Interview Kickstart offers. Let's say you get that ML engineer role in your dream company. One of the things I want to talk today is what are the kind of work you will have to do? Like what is expected from you? How would you kind of like grow your career and be successful in industry? So maybe a question for you to just warm up. What do you think are the responsibilities of an ML engineer in industry? Do you want to maybe like kind of like answer in the Q&A part? Or yeah, you could also like raise your hand and then give your thoughts. So what do you think is expected of an ML engineer in industry? Yeah, any thoughts? Okay, so yeah, so there are a few answers already. So Akash just said MLOps. Yeah, that is an important part. Being able to like productionize your models with MLOps, that's important. Maitri just said like lots of data cleanup. Yeah, that's important, especially if you're a data engineer. You'll have to kind of like construct good data sets for training, ML development, model training. Yep, all of that. So identifying opportunities for like automated design. Yeah, lots of good suggestions here. Training models, feature engineering, decision making. Yeah, these are all great examples. So yeah, so one thing interesting is like all of you guys had like this diverse set of answers. So it may sound like there are way too many things an ML engineer has to do in industry. But in reality, the principles which an ML engineer would follow to first get into a great role in one of your dream companies, and also to kind of grow your career in the company is actually very common. And those are the things we're gonna like discuss in this session. So we're gonna look at what are the different type of ML engineer titles. What are the different levels in industry, what are the responsibilities of each level. We'll also look at how to kind of get your dream role as an ML engineer in industry in this session. So yeah, so here is the agenda for the session. We're going to first start off by looking at different job titles, because this is something which was very confusing to me too when I started kind of like going to industry. We'll then look at the different career paths. There are typically two career paths you can take in industry. We'll discuss both of those. We will talk about typical career progressions. What are the different levels in industry? How do you go from one level to the other? We will also look at the responsibilities at each level. So what is expected from you at, let's say, a senior level? How do you go from a senior level to the staff level and so on? I'll then talk about a typical day in the life of an ML engineer in one of these companies. We will look at the day-to-day activities an ML engineer would do. We will also talk about some of the things ML engineers would do, maybe like once a quarter, once a year, and so on. And then the last session is going to be focused on how do you kind of like start the journey. You may be maybe an engineer, maybe working on the back end or front end in one of the companies, and you want to make a switch to the ML engineering role. Or you may be already working in ML as an ML engineer, but you want to like maybe grow to one of the FAANG companies. So I'll quickly touch upon what are steps you can take to kind of like start the journey and then get your dream job in one of your dream companies. So that's the agenda for today's session. So yeah, so we're going to start by talking about the job titles, mostly because it's very confusing. So you may see a bunch of job titles as an ML engineer. These are all fairly similar with a few small differences. So we'll kind of look at what are the differences so that you would know what is the right type of job titles for you to apply. So some of the job titles you would see is ML engineer, or it may be called ML research engineer. This is the type of titles we used to have when we hire in Apple. And then research scientist is very common in Google. Applied research scientist is what like Amazon calls ML engineers. Then there are also these like slightly job specific titles like data engineer, data scientist, ML architecture, software engineers, MLOps engineer, NLP engineers, computer vision engineer. This was like my title when I started in Amazon. Also like annotation engineers, evaluation engineers, and so on. So this sounds very confusing, but we'll kind of look at the commonalities and the differences between all of these titles. I think there are some questions. Let me quickly see if the questions before we go to the next slide. So yeah, so Amit was asking, I believe an ML engineer has to have strong DS background. For an MLE to suggest they have to have good data science background and not just engineering. So yeah, so I think we'll see a little bit of that in the coming slide. But yeah, as Amit, like you were saying, yeah, definitely. So for an ML engineer to be successful in industry, you need both data science, also like ML understanding, and also like engineering background. So we'll see some of that in the last section where we look at what are the different skills or fundamentals you should have to be successful as an ML engineer. And definitely it's going to be a combination of this. Understanding like data science, like maybe SQL tools, how do you store data? Also understanding the ML concepts, like what are classical ML techniques, what are deep learning techniques, maybe generative AI. All of those, along with strong engineering background, like being good at data structures and algorithm and coding, those are all important. So we will see this in detail in the last section. But yeah, good question, Amit. Yeah, if you have more questions, feel free to add. So yeah, so coming back to the slide. So these titles look pretty confusing. Let's look at what are the commonalities. So the first thing you want to look at is this difference between an engineer and a scientist. This is probably the most common difference you would see in the different job titles. Now, if it's an engineer role, let's say an ML engineer or a data engineer, as an engineer, you are expected to like build and maintain existing systems. So when I started at Google, I was given a big system to build and maintain. This was training deep learning models for Google Maps. So this is very common. You may have to maintain some existing systems, which means that you would have to do bug fixes. You would have to like add features into that system. That will be one part of your responsibility if you are taking an engineer based job title. Of course, the second thing is you're going to solve like high value problems using AI ML. This is something which is going to be pretty common, irrespective of like any job title you take. This is very important. And then as an engineer, you're also going to apply state-of-the-art machine learning solutions. So kind of understanding what are the most popular algorithms right now in the field of machine learning, and then applying it to solve problems in your domain, in your company. These are all the typical things which an engineer would have to do. Now, if you're taking a scientist role, like maybe a research scientist or an applied research scientist, that would mean that one of the important components of your job would be to do research to extend the state of the art. So as an engineer, you may be like using the state of the art, but if you are taking a scientist role, you should also, you're also expected to like kind of extend the state of the art and then come up with new algorithms to solve the problem. Often scientists also would write research papers. This kind of depends on the company too. Like for example, in Apple, we weren't spending a lot of time on writing papers, whereas this was very common like in Google and Amazon. Also in general, the scientists are expected to like solve harder problems. So these are typically problems for which there isn't a clear solution available today. And then you are expected to like experiment and then come up with like new solutions. And typically scientists would also typically in many places you are expected to have a PhD as well. So yeah, so that's like the differentiation between engineers and scientists. There are a couple more questions in the Q&A, so I'm gonna like go through them now before we go to the next slide. So again, there is an anonymous question, which is, can a test engineer become an ML engineer? Of course you can. And I think these switch up courses, which we just like heard in the introduction, is it's a really good way for you to like kind of learn the skills which are needed for an ML engineer and then become successful. Yeah, so totally like, so in the last section, we'll also talk about what are the skills you should learn to become a successful ML engineer, but totally, yeah, you can be a test engineer today. You could take one of these courses, learn about the skills needed to become an ML engineer and then become successful there. Animesh had a question. Can you talk about switching from a TLM, which is tech lead manager, distributed systems role to a TLM in an ML domain role? So this is again a very similar question. So of course, like if you have just worked on distributed systems, you may not have learned a lot of like skills needed in the ML domain, like kind of building new ML architectures, training models, doing all the other things like evaluating models, creating data sets and so on. But that's where the a course like the switch up course we have could be actually very useful. Like you could actually like kind of learn the skill sets needed through the course and then kind of like switch to the ML domain role. So yeah, so this is totally possible. Lots of people have done that. It's all about getting the right skills which are needed for you to be successful as an ML engineer. So yeah, good question, Animesh. Now, yeah, going through the slides again. So we looked at two main job titles. One is an ML engineer, and the other is a scientist role. Other type of job titles you may see are some of these. So for example, like you may see an annotation engineer, a data engineer, ML engineer, and so on. These are job titles which are a bit more specific to certain aspects of machine learning. So if you're joining as an annotation engineer, you may spend most of your time creating data sets, annotating them. If you're a data engineer, you may spend more time building data pipelines and storage systems and so on. So these would be needing a subset of the skills, not all the skills of an ML engineer, but they also have a lot of commonalities. And having all of the skills would actually make you a much better better engineer, even though you are going to focus on one of these. So again, like the two main distinctions you would see are a bunch of jobs would have an engineer job title, others would have scientist job title. Also, you may see roles which are like kind of very specific to part of the ML model development, which could be like an annotation engineer, MLOps engineer, and so on. So yeah, so based on the job title, the focus may be different, but having the whole set of skills would actually kind of make you a better ML engineer. Few more questions. Can you give an example? So Moni is asking, can you give an example of problem AI ML engineer solves? Yeah. So I actually have an example in the section called Life of an AI ML Engineer. But to give you an example now, when I was an AI ML engineer in Google Maps, one of the problems we were solving was looking at imagery, so which could be like street view images, and then we were building machine learning models to find roads and buildings and trees and so on. So typically problems AML engineer would solve would involve building some machine learning models to solve a specific problem which the company would be interested in. And in the ML switch-up course, some of these problems we cover are, let's say, like image classification or object detection if you are in a computer vision domain, or if you're in a natural language processing domain, this may be like a text classification, text summarization, and so on. We have a lot of questions. I'm going to maybe take one more question now, and then we'll come back to answer some more. So we need that question. How often does an engineer need to build systems in day-to-day life, as probably most classical algorithms have already been implemented? So this is a great question. Yeah, of course, like the popular algorithms, like maybe like architectures like transformers or algorithm like architectures like convolutional neural networks. These are pretty much already available, let's say in some common libraries like PyTorch or let's say like scikit-learn and so on. So you're not going to like go re-implement these algorithms every day, but understanding these algorithms well would make you a lot more successful in your daily job, because then let's say if you need to do some hyperparameter tuning, or if you're given a specific problem, you have to decide which algorithm to use, you would have a lot more insights to do that. Also, one reason it's important to like understand these systems and algorithms is that they're also asked in your interviews when you're applying as an ML engineer. So yeah, even though you're not going to do re-implement algorithms every once in a while in industry, it's important to like understand them both to clear interviews and also to make good design choices when you're solving problem in industry. So yeah, I'll take the next question from Rahul, which is the switch-up course targeted to engineer role, or will it cover some of the scientist roles too? So yeah, so the switch-up course would cover both. Some of the switch-up courses we actually go pretty deep to, where we would actually discuss some of the papers as well. Of course, it's not going to be very deep because we want to cover a broad set of topics. But switch-up course would also give you the fundamentals to kind of like start looking at the scientist roles as well. Maybe let me take one more question from Monica. Does switch-up course provide information about transitioning from engineer to scientist? Most of the course would be focusing on the engineer stuff. So yeah, so basically if you're an ML engineer and you're looking to like transition to a scientist, the switch-up course won't be focusing on bulk of the course on that. Bulk of the course would be focusing on, let's say if you are not an ML engineer, you want to like kind of go into the ML engineer role, but we'll also cover some of the state-of-the-art papers, which would be useful for scientist roles as well. Maybe let me take one more question. I have so you had a question, similar question on switching from SD, software development engineer. Is it better to seek SD in FAANG first, then switch up to MLE within FAANG, or directly aim for MLE in FAANG? Yeah, so there isn't a lot of advantage for you to like switch to a software development engineer in FAANG and then do a switch, that will be like 2 switches in your career. You don't want to do too many switches because then you don't have enough time to like grow your career. So I would say the better approach is like directly switch to the final role you want, which is, let's say, an ML engineer in FAANG. That way you could also kind of reach there quickly and then spend more time growing your career in the role you like. So yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so interest of time, I'm gonna go back to the slides. We will address many of these questions in the end as well. But yeah, great questions. Feel free to like ask more questions. So now we're gonna look at career paths. So let's say you became an ML engineer. What are the typical career paths you would take? There are 2 career paths which are available to most people. One is what is called an IC path, and the other is the manager path. So in an IC path, which is also called like individual contributor, your main goal is to contribute to projects by yourself. So your primary responsibility is to make sure that the projects become successful. This is pretty much the starting point for every engineer. So when I started my career as a research engineer in Amazon, I was again like on the IC role. The second career path you have is as a people manager. So a people manager is gonna like manage engineers, and these engineers are gonna complete the projects. So so there are 2 main responsibilities of a people manager. One is to maintain a great culture in the team. So things I look for as an engineering manager are like kind of good collaborations in the team, lots of career growth for the individual contributors in the team, being able to like kind of learn quickly and then be successful in projects. So these are all the culture I look for. Also, like as a people manager, you want to make sure that there is good career growth for the ICs in the team. Otherwise, ICs may get like kind of bored and then leave for other teams. Of course, you want to make sure that projects are also successful because that's really what the company is expecting you to do. So you're also going to make sure that your team is delivering successfully in the expected time on all of these projects. So now we're going to look at engineering levels. This is again something which may be confusing for you if you're like kind of new to industry. So every company has different levels. So if you're an Apple, the levels are like ICT2, T3, T4. Google is like L3, L4, and then Facebook has something similar. So this may sound very confusing, but I'm gonna like in the next slide kind of tell you how to read these levels and understand if you are applying to the right level for you in your career. So this is a really good way for you to like kind of understand the different levels. So typically, irrespective of what the company calls, these are like kind of a common kind of career path people follow. So if when you're joining the company very early on in your career, you may start as a junior engineer. Some people may also start as an engineer, which is like the next level. So in Apple, the ICT2 would be the junior engineer, and then engineer is going to be T3. And then you can become a senior engineer once you get promoted. This would be like T4. Typically, I think you typically switch to management after you become a senior engineer, but that can also be different. But if you're in the IC career path, you can get promoted to a senior engineer, then to a staff engineer, senior staff, principal engineer, and so on. Or you can go to the manager level where you can become an engineering manager, become a senior engineering manager, a director, senior director, VP, and so on. So basically, the way you want to look at the levels is you want to understand what is the senior engineer level in the company you're applying for, and then make sure that you're like kind of, whether it's called like, I don't know, ICT3 or like, let's say, I don't know, like L4 or L5 and so on. You want to make sure that you're kind of like entering at the right level based on your experience. Let me take a few more questions. So an anonymous question, how many MLOps engineers typically work on an ML project? This is a good question. So it depends on the scale of the company. If you're looking at companies like, let's say, Google or Facebook, which are really large, there would be a central team which is responsible for doing MLOps. So for those of you who are not familiar, MLOps is all about building pipelines to automate model development, so that if you want to, like, let's say, build machine learning models every once in a while, you don't have to like manually run a bunch of scripts to do that. You can automate the whole thing. So yeah, so in big companies like Google, Facebook, you can have like a centralized MLOps team, which has like maybe, I don't know, like 30, 40 people or even like larger. In smaller companies, you may actually have one or two MLOps engineer in each team who is kind of like working on the, let's say, MLOps part. Or like in some other, like say startups, you may not have an MLOps engineer at all. And then the ML engineer is actually responsible for like kind of taking care of the whole like MLOps field. So yeah, so we have a lot of questions in Q&A. So let me actually take some more questions. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go to the end of the questions so that I can take some more. And then if your question wasn't answered, we will have some time in the end to answer a question. So just like kind of mention, and then we can go through. So yeah, I'm not going to take all the questions in order, because then like we can't take all the questions right now. Also, I want to leave some time for the material. So yeah, I'm going to do it at random, but if your question is not answered, we'll have a section in the end for Q&A. But so yeah, so Ashok asked, Jay, how does an ML product management fit into this role descriptor? Yeah, so the product management is not something we're covering here. We're mostly focusing on the ML, kind of the engineering role. So product management would be entirely different, but we're not covering it in today's session. So yeah, so none of the things we're mentioning directly applies to the product management in today's session. Yuk has a question: do AI ML teams follow agile methodology? So again, it depends on the culture of the company. So for example, like big companies, I've been like Google and Apple, they do follow the agile methodology as much as possible. I'm also familiar with some projects where they follow the waterfall model, where like they finish one thing, go to the next, and so on. So again, it kind of depends on the company's kind of philosophy of ML development, and also like the stage they are in. Let me take one more question from Akash, which is, how do I choose an ML specialization between CV and NLP if I have no preference? How long can I stay as a generalist if I want to stay as an IC? So yeah, so between computer vision and NLP, it mostly depends on your preference. And again, like if you don't have a preference between the two, my personal take is NLP is actually becoming a bit more popular now compared to CV. So if you don't have any preference, I would say maybe work on the NLP and also like some of these newer fields like generative AI. And again, this is something we cover quite a bit in Interview Kickstart. So we have some of this in our like switch up course. We'll also actually have like more focused courses coming very soon on like generative AI. And how long can I stay as a generalist if I want to stay as an IC? So typically, like, yeah, so I think by generalist, maybe what Akash mentioned is like without really taking a specialization on CV or NLP. So most of the problems you would work in industry would actually be in one of these domains. So there are some roles available where you would look at all of these domains in one go. That was one of the role I took when I just joined Apple. We were looking at all of the domains. So you actually want a generalist who can work on all of them. But pretty much most of the teams I know either work on CV or NLP or one of the related domain like time series. So yeah, so I think like, again, if you just want to be a generalist without focusing on one of them, the number of roles you have would be limited, because if you have a team that's actually working on CV, they would prefer someone who actually knows CV very well. But from a switch up course point of view, we cover both like CV and NLP pretty exclusively, like in our content. So you can kind of become an expert in both of those. All right, so now we're going to go back to the slide deck a bit. We're going to look at the responsibilities of an ML engineer. So yeah, so some of the common responsibilities of an ML engineer are, of course, like kind of maintain existing ML systems. So typically you would have some systems in your team, and you should like add new features to it, fix bugs in the system. You will have to solve like new problems with machine learning. So for example, if you are in a self-driving car company, they may have a problem like detecting emergency vehicles, and you will have to build some machine learning models to do that. So in the switch up course, we actually cover object detection in great detail, which would kind of help you with problems like these. You would also want to like you will also have to like read papers and then prototype some of the new techniques, add on top of existing techniques. So again, like they're kind of having some of these fundamentals we discuss in the switch up course would be like very useful. Other responsibilities of an ML engineer, you want to like kind of collaborate with your partner team so that projects are successful. So you want to make sure that you get the right requirements from your client team. You deliver models in time. In general, you want to build a great culture in your team. This is a primary responsibility of the manager, but also it's important for every team member to contribute. So you want to make sure that there's a good culture with like respect for everyone, make the whole work fun so that you kind of enjoy going to work every day. Also, one thing which is very important to grow in industry is to kind of like kind of give feedback to your peers, but also like receive feedback and then act on them. So you want to make sure that you're always kind of getting good feedback so that you can kind of like work on your weaknesses and then like grow as an engineer in the industry. So now we're going to look at, so we already saw before that there are these different levels which are available, like a junior ML engineer, senior engineer, staff engineer, and so on. So now we're going to kind of look at what are the different responsibilities of each of these levels. So if you're a junior engineer, you will typically have a team lead or a mentor, and the mentor is going to provide you requirements. When you get some results, they would review the result to make sure that it's correct. In general, you would have like smaller tasks given to you for shorter duration. And then all that you have to do is like complete the task in time and you are fine. Now, as you get promoted and become an ML engineer, you would start owning more systems. So you would own some of the smaller systems in your team. Again, you would still have a mentor who would provide you requirements, review your results, but suddenly the scope of your projects are a bit bigger. So when you're a junior engineer, it's very small. You have like a bit more bigger scope project as you become an ML engineer. Once you become a senior ML engineer, again, the scope of the problems increase. You also start owning more important systems in your team. You would be the expert in certain areas of the team. So if someone has a question in your area of expertise, they would actually come to you. You would also start spending time on taking a large problem, breaking down into like smaller pieces to implement, and then giving it to some of your junior engineers so that they could actually do the implementation. Now, once you grow to the more senior levels, like let's say a staff engineer, senior staff, principal, and so on, the main difference is you would also start identifying problems your team can solve. So you would kind of look at what are the products your team or company is building, what are the main shortcomings in the current solution. So you would try to identify projects to solve as a team. You would start breaking it down into smaller pieces, and then you will start assigning it to your senior engineers. You would also start setting the roadmap for your team for like maybe a year, a few years, and so on. The scope of the problems you look at becomes bigger. Also, you don't solve the problem fully by yourself. You break down the solution and then give it to like people at lower levels to solve. So we're now going to look at what are the typical things you would do as an ML engineer during your day-to-day kind of time in the team. Of course, like if you have a hybrid work environment, or you have already done the return to office, then of course like commute is a big part, depends on where you are. So I had commutes from like 5 to 10 minutes when I started to like all the way up to like 1 hour, 1.5 hours. Typically, one of the main things you would do early on in your day would be a project stand-up. Some of the teams would have daily stand-ups where you give updates on the project to everyone else. Some of the teams they have like a weekly team meeting where you actually discuss updates. This is also a good time for you to like escalate any blockers so that you can actually be successful in your projects. Then you would spend a bunch of time fixing what I call fires, which are maybe some bugs which your users reported, or some features which are needed for the next release of the product. This would also be done by you collaborating with a lot of your team members to solve it. You will spend some time during your day making progress on the project. This would be maybe coming up with a design for the solution, implementing some code, sending those for review, and so on. Typically, if you're in an office, you would spend like your lunchtime kind of bonding with your team. So this is very important for you to like kind of build that network, also like kind of build a great culture in the team. So this is very important. Coffee is very important. You would have like coffee bunch of times during the day. You would also spend some time like reviewing things. So you may review design docs from your other team members, looking at code reviews from the team. You would also spend time brainstorming. So you may brainstorm with like your mentor, project lead, and so on. And then you head home towards the end of the day. There are also a few things you would do like occasionally. Some of these ML teams also have like reading groups. So you would like kind of read papers and then present them in the team. This is again a great way for you to make sure that you're kind of like close to the state of the art and understanding how the whole field is moving. As you become more senior, you would also spend time on planning. So what are the things your team should do during the year? What are the tasks the team should do during the quarter? So there'll be a lot of time planning. You would also have meetings, one-on-ones with your skip managers who are like your manager's manager, also with other leaders in the org. Again, these are great way for you to get visibility and also to understand what is the roadmap for the company and the org in general. Social activities, these are very important so that you kind of build that networking with everyone else in the company. There are also like performance reviews where you can kind of get feedback, get promoted, also give feedback to your peers. So maybe we spend a few slides. Let me answer a few questions. There are also some raised hands, so maybe I'll take some of the raised hands now. So I see there is like Ajit had a raised hand, so let me actually allow Ajit to talk. So Ajit, like, do you wanna ask your question?
Yeah, what is the in the machine learning life cycle? Like, what is the most of the part the ML engineer spends on?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. So for everyone else, just repeating the question. So Ajit is asking, of the entire ML life cycle, what are the areas where an ML engineer would spend time? Now, as I was telling in the job title section, the amount of time you would spend actually depends on your job title too. So if you're a data engineer, you're actually going to spend time mostly on like kind of cleaning up the data, maybe like getting annotations, preparing data sets. If you're actually an ML engineer, you would spend most of your time on building machine learning models. So for example, like when I was in Apple early on, we had a problem to kind of find like food images. So we spent almost a year trying to build a machine learning model to understand whether there is like food in an image or not. So spend a lot of time building models, evaluating models, understanding where it fails, collecting more data, retraining the models, and so on. So if you're an ML engineer working on model development, most of your time would be spent on training models, evaluating the model, understanding the failure cases, and then like kind of maybe doing more experiments, either doing some hyperparameter tuning or collecting better data to like retrain the model. But it also, as I said before, it also depends on what kind of role you have. Is it like an ML engineer role? Is it an MLOps engineer role, data engineer role, and so on?
Thank you.
Yep, good question. So maybe let me keep moving. so that we can finish the session in time, and then I can spend some time to like answer all the questions you guys have. All right, so yeah, again, like we looked at the day in the life of an ML engineer. So now what I want to kind of like talk about is like, how do you start your ML engineering journey? So you may either be maybe a backend engineer, like an engineer in industry already, and you want to like change your area of focus to machine learning. Or you may be like, let's say in grad school, you want to like kind of get a ML engineering role, or you're already an ML engineer, you want to like just move to like one of the better companies, like your dream company. So what are the different type of things you should be very familiar and add to your kind of skill set so that you can actually like kind of start this journey and get your job in your dream company? So I think these were also like some questions people had. So some of that would become clear here. So again, as an ML engineer, the first thing you want to do is you want to become acquire the fundamentals. So some of this would include becoming very comfortable programming in Python, because now Python is the most common language people use for doing machine learning. And you want to understand like the basic math you would use as an ML engineer, like linear algebra, calculus, like integration, differentiation, statistics, and probability. Also, you want to understand the basics of databases and SQL, especially if you're a data engineer. This would become very important. Once you acquire the fundamentals, you want to learn the ML basics. These are things like what is supervised learning, unsupervised learning, feature engineering, and so on. You want to spend a lot of time understanding the popular ML algorithms. Right now, this is like neural networks and deep learning. So all of these are covered like in great detail in our switch up course in Interview Kickstart. And then again, this was a question someone asked, like you would typically work in industry in one of the application areas. So this could be like natural language processing if you're working on text, computer vision if you're going to work on images. So you want to make sure that you're pretty comfortable with the common techniques in this application domain. There are a bunch of advanced topics which are becoming very popular. Generative AI is one of them. You guys would have already heard about like ChatGPT and LLMs by now. Again, if you're in industry, you're also going to use MLOps to productionize your system. So you want to understand what that is. You would also want to spend some time on ML system design. First, because it'll make you better ML engineers. Second, because it'll also be asked in your ML engineering interviews. And then you want to practice a lot. So one of the things we do in the switch up course is we actually have like real assignments you can do. So you get a lot of practice when you actually complete these assignments. There are also longer projects you can take, which would be like a few months time. And that would also give you a lot more insights into the type of projects you would do in industry. Again, in the switch up course, we also offer mock interviews with like engineers and hiring managers from the industry like me. And that would again give you a lot more insights into the type of questions which would be asked in the interviews. So yeah, so these are all the things I feel you should do in your ML engineer like journey, so that you can actually get an ML engineer role in your dream company. And at Interview Kickstart, we make sure that we kind of add all of these components into the curriculum so that you get a really good idea into like all the different pieces which are expected from you. So yeah, so I'm gonna kind of like quickly summarize the session and then answer all the questions you guys had. So in summary, in this session, we first started with the different job titles you would see as an ML engineer, because it's very confusing. And we kind of looked at what are the differences of different titles. We looked at different job levels, all the way from a junior engineer to like a senior staff or principal engineer in the IC ladder and also in the management ladder. We looked at different career paths you can take, either as an individual contributor or as a manager. We looked at the different responsibilities of an ML engineer and how this would change based on your level. We looked at the typical day in the life of an ML engineer. What are the things you would do every day? What are the things you would do maybe like once a quarter or year? And then I covered what are like important things you should learn to start this journey. And again, like this is something which we have thought a lot carefully at Interview Kickstart and incorporated it into the curriculum. So yeah, so I guess before I conclude, we have prepared a simple challenge for you folks to kind of like get some experience solving real problems. So we're gonna share with you a survey with 5 Python questions. If you complete this, you would get a certificate. You could also like share it in your LinkedIn network and also like kind of ask us questions with this hashtag. So yeah, so I'm gonna like stop the session now and then take questions. We're also gonna like share this survey with the 5 Python questions to all of you folks in chat. So yeah, so let me just share that. And then, oh yeah, so Abhinav has already shared that. So yeah, so I'm gonna end here. If you folks have questions, I'm happy to take that. So maybe I'll wait for you to like maybe raise hands and then we'll take questions there now. Also, if there are, these are questions about the program, we also have like members from the operations team to answer that. And I can take any questions about like role and engineering and all of that. So yeah, so we'll kind of like go through the raised hands first. And then I can also go through the Q&A and then answer questions. So yeah, thank you everyone for attending the session. Let me now first look at the raised hands first. Okay, so I see like 3 raised hands. So yeah, first is from Rajashekhar. So yeah, so Rajashekhar, like what's your question?
Yeah, thanks, Jay, for the session. My question is that in Apple, I am seeing a few of the requirements like a backend engineer plus machine learning engineer as a requirement. So are we going to see something like a front-end engineer plus backend as a full stack? Similar to that, we are going to see backend plus machine learning as a skill set in the future. Like, do we have any advantage like having the backend, preparing like backend prepare system design, like a distributed scalable thing versus ML? So is it going to be an advantage?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. Thank you, Rajshekhar. So I would say, so yeah, so even though some of the roles would say, let's say backend plus ML engineer, I would say like you basically want to focus on everything that the ML engineering role needs, because that's like your best bet to get an ML engineer role. And of course, there is some overlap, like maybe knowing like kind of data storage and like SQL and all of that would kind of help you as a data engineer and also some other backend things. So there is some overlap, but most of the roles you would see would actually be focused on like the ML engineer topics. So I would say the best bet would be like to first understand everything that is expected from in an ML engineering role, so that you have like more kind of opportunities when you're interviewing. So yeah, I would definitely kind of like recommend doing that. And yeah, I don't see a lot of roles coming in the future, which may be like ML plus front end, because these are pretty different roles. So especially if you're applying to a big company like FAANG, they can totally hire an expert in the ML engineering field and another expert in front end. So yeah, I would recommend focusing on ML engineering requirements first, because that would kind of like increase the amount of opportunities you have when you're interviewing. But yeah, great question.
I was thinking ML plus backend. I was thinking so ML plus backend has a lot of kind of overlapping, like as you mentioned, SQL and all. So that is what I was thinking.
Yeah. So even there, I would actually say like the best bet is still kind of focusing on ML, mostly because like backend maybe like using, let's say, Java, for example, whereas ML engineers would mostly be doing things in Python. So if you focus on the requirements of the ML engineer, that will also cover like some backend roles which are using Python. So I would feel like, especially in the FAANG companies, like if they want a very different backend engineer, they would just hire like 2 separate people. But of course, like as we know, given the current industry, they may be looking for people with multiple skills. But still, I would say first kind of like cover all the requirements needed from an ML engineer. That way you can kind of apply it to like all the different ML engineer roles. And then if you have more time, maybe look at the backend. So I wouldn't expect that to be a common case going forward.
Okay, okay. If it is like I have 15 years of experience, will it be like 2 years of machine learning experience will be enough to get ML role? Because I, as a backend engineer till now,
Yeah.
I may put
Yeah,
it like
yeah,
13 years in the backend and 2 years of
yeah.
ML
Yeah,
should be
so
fine.
so that's a really good question. So yeah, so the advantage of this switch up course is that it'll cover like everything you need to know as an ML engineer. So yeah, even if you have like only 2 years of ML experience, you can still comfortably clear the interviews, because we have kind of looked at the typical type of questions which are asked as an ML engineer, and then we cover all of that in the course. So yeah, it's totally fine if you don't have a lot of years of experience as an ML engineer. Once you complete the program, you would have enough skills to like clear the interviews. That shouldn't be a problem at all.
Okay, thank
Yep.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna take the next hand raise, which is from Yug. So yeah, Yug, do you wanna ask the question?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, yeah, actually, I had also put it in my Q&A, so I'll just read that out. I
Yep.
actually joined the seminar a little bit late, so I don't know if this info is correct, but I checked on the IK website, and the switch up course is about 11 months. So I have some background in, all of these things. Like I've touched upon these things: Python, data analytics, cloud, and ML libraries, and things like that. So are there fine tunings available in the courses where we can meet in the middle, and I can target my studies more to a specific use case, or something along those lines?
Yeah. So maybe Dashrath, like, do you wanna take that question?
Hey, Yug, this is Darshat from admissions. So I lead the entire switch-up team here at IK. When you say you have certain background in that, can you expand a bit more on that? I'd say, would you say you have a foundational understanding of things like bias variance or classical ML algorithms like supervised and unsupervised ML? Have you done any hands-on work, or how do you mean?
Yes, so I have done hands-on work with my previous company. It was a greenfield project that I had a chance to work on. There I got to touch upon a lot about, like, I was working with the Keras and the PyTorch library really closely during that time, and that I was drawing off of my experience from university. So that before that I just had like academic experience, but during that time I was able to like deploy a model in production, support it and maintain it for a couple of years until I switched companies, and then right now I just do pure SDE work. But this is where I had like I was able to get we didn't do like really professional MLOps, but we had started to build upon like deploying models and directly deploying APIs for those models, and having this as part of your CI/CD pipeline. So there was like very I would say nascent steps that we were building out the ML infrastructure in our company, and I had the opportunity to be a part of that and contribute to that. I wouldn't say I led the effort in any way, but yeah, that's the kind of experience that I have, if that makes sense.
Awesome. So a couple of things. One is, I'd say MLOps, if you're going for an ML engineering sort of route, right? MLOps is quite necessary. You will end up having at least a couple of rounds of that, right? And what that means is, I'd say, going through collecting, labeling, validating data, then getting questions or having in-depth knowledge of, let's say, feature engineering, transformation, selection, right? Data joining, data storage, then going to advanced labeling, augmentation, data pre-processing, right? And then I'd say, how do you look at ML modeling pipelines in production, right? So I'd say architecture search, model resource management techniques, right? High performance modeling, model analysis, interpretability, all those things would come into picture. And then you go about deploying models in production. So model serving, patterns and infrastructure, model management, delivery, monitoring, logging, all those things. Okay. What I would suggest, if you do not have that sort of end-to-end experience. Okay? Then go with our ML switcher program, because we are going to cover that, I'd say, in a just ML ops part is about 9 weeks, right? You would get to do a lot of hands-on work in the curriculum. Okay, that's there. Lots of assignments, lots of hands-on work. Some of the things might feel basic to you, things like, let's say, when you're going through the Python weeks, right? Even that we are going to teach you from an ML engineering point of view, but those might feel basic. You can accelerate through those weeks, but I would still suggest that if you don't have that end-to-end experience on machine learning engineering, then go with ML switcher. Either way, one thing that you should do is just respond to any email in your inbox from Intel Kickstart. It would go to your program advisor. They would actually set up a bit more detailed 25-30 minutes sort of conversation, right? Feel free to send them your resume so that they can go through it. They would actually ask you a bunch of technical questions to understand your current I'd say knowledge of ML, and then advise you on next steps, whether to go with the entire switcher program or just go through maybe the interview prep bit of it, right? So either way, they would help you navigate through it. Does that make sense? Any follow-up questions on that?
No, I think that makes sense. And yeah, I agree. I think like it would be a good idea to kind of like take this offline and discuss this more in detail, where someone can like look at my resume or my LinkedIn profile and suggest even more detailed steps. That would be great. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Yep. So yeah, thank you, Dashrath. So maybe let's keep going through the raised hands. So maybe like let me go to Akash. So yeah, Akash, like, do you wanna ask your question?
Akash, you would have
Yep.
to unmute yourself. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Okay. Awesome. So my question is about like tailoring, like the switch up. I mean, sometimes it can become like a carrot that you're chasing and you don't know when you're done, right? Like how many projects is enough to apply, and what sort of projects? Like, is a standalone project worth it, or do I need to compare kind of projects are seen in a better light than other forms of projects by the recruiter or whoever is reading my resume? Yeah.
So maybe they should, like, do you want to answer, and I can give some of my thoughts too.
Yeah, so I just lost Akash in between due to bad network. But yeah, Akash, can you sorry for that? Can you rephrase your question once? I just lost you in between for a few seconds.
Yeah, are some projects inherently viewed in a better light by recruiters than others? Like, for example, is a Kaggle project where you can compare your performance against others, or like a Hugging Face model or a contribution to some open source code. Like, is that given more weightage versus a project that you've done on your own data set on GitHub? I'm just trying to like play the game right, and not just do a project for the sake of learning, but also choose projects which have better visibility in the eyes of the recruiter or have more weight. So do you have any opinions on that?
Yeah, Akash, so we have shortlisted about, I'd say, 4 to 6 mini projects, and then a number of capstone projects. Okay? And the way all those capstone projects are and the mini projects are inculcated in the curriculum, keeping in mind the way ML can be implemented in different industries, okay? Or different use cases of machine learning, I would say. So, for example, one of the projects is stock sentiment analysis, where you'd be building an ML system to predict the sentiment of a particular stock based on, let's say, Twitter tweets, right? It could be Reddit feed, could be any textual data, but that's one. Now that is use case of ML within finance. Okay. Another one is, I'd say, building food intake analysis and a recommendation system. Okay. Now that's where you would end up using a lot of computer vision, classification system, all those things, right? So that's another. Another one would be on large language models, right? LLMs. So that's these days, I'd say it's trending, this technology, right? So that's there. Another one is, how do you predict hospital spending per patient, right? Building a model to provide the best healthcare while optimizing the cost and processes required based on patient spend capacity, right? Machine defect analyzer, right? So, and as you would be as you will gradually progress through the program, Akash, you would also end up developing certain, I'd say, inclination towards certain areas compared to others. Let's say when you're going through classical ML, supervised and unsupervised ML, right? And then you would move towards a modern ML architectures like, let's say, neural networks, computer vision, NLP, all of that, right? So you would also end up, let's say, you might be more inclined towards classical ML project compared to, let's say, modern ML project, right? And then you can start focusing on those sort of roles and those sort of projects more, right? That's it. That said, you would have to do at least one capstone project to get the certification, and the certification eventually makes you eligible for our career services, which are essentially helping you with placements. But you are more than welcome to do multiple capstone projects as well, right? You want to see that, hey, I want to do a computer vision project, and then I want to do a project on neural architecture. So you're more than welcome to do that, right? That's there. You can also bring your own data set, your own capstone project. Our instructor team would look at the use case that you are trying to solve through that project, and if it makes sense, we are more than happy to help you execute that as well. Akash, and folks like Jay would help you, I'd say, mentor you through it.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe to add also to that. So yeah, I guess like, so you were also asking about like this maybe Hugging Face project versus like Kaggle project. So I would say those are all great for the recruiter, but then like that would also take a lot more time for you to do. So I would feel like kind of doing this like diverse set of projects we offer in the switch up would quickly give you hands-on experience in like all the different areas, instead of maybe like you doing like one project for like, I don't know, 6 months on a Kaggle and then like Kaggle thing, and then like you just have like enough expertise in one and not on like everything else. So that's where I would feel the diversity would actually be a lot more better than having like, let's say, one kind of like Kaggle competition project, or maybe like one large kind of Hugging Face project. But if you have interesting ideas, you could also kind of use that as your project, like in the switch up program.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Good question, Akash. So yeah, so maybe let me take like Amulya's question. So yeah, so Amulya, like, what's your question?
Yeah, hi. I am a software engineer. Actually, most of my experience is in embedded domain, and some of it is in a backend engineer. So if I want to target an ML role in a top tier company, how feasible is it? Because I see there is a lot of overlap between backend engineer and ML roles, but my expertise in that is minimal, and most of it is in embedded domain. So what are your advice and suggestions on that?
Yeah. So one thing I would recommend is, so the switch up program is basically targeting people who want to like switch from a different domain in industry to machine learning to an ML engineer role. So we kind of carefully created the curriculum so that we kind of cover pretty much everything that's like expected from you. So yeah, so it's totally fine even if like your current role is something very different from an ML engineer, because we would make sure that during the program we cover pretty much everything you need, all the way from like fundamentals like learning Python to kind of the math you need, all the way to like understanding all of the neural networks and doing projects. So of course, like what I would say is you should make sure that you spend time. So that's where like you can kind of make the difference. But where you start totally doesn't matter, because we make sure that the curriculum is complete enough to cover everying. But yeah, maybe
So
Dashrath,
that
like, do you want to add anything to it? Yeah, and if you have follow-up
one
questions,
question,
yeah,
like,
Amuli.
yeah. So I have around 5 years of experience in embedded domain. So if I have to switch up to ML, so do I have to start again from zero or level 0, or how does that work? So because can you?
Amulya, so I'll take it in two parts. First is, I'd say, embedded to ML, and then the level of seniority. Okay.
Yeah.
First, I'd say, and that's not just for embedded, I would say any software engineering domain. Okay. You already have quite a few skills, I'd say, from a technical point of view as well as behavioral point of view. Behavioral, I'm talking more about, I'd say, the way you work with a team. End of the day, a company like Apple or Google or Meta considers engineering as a team sport, right? It's not an individual sport. So if you have the ability to work with a team and then help folks around you move towards the end goal faster, right? That plays a big role, right? They are big on those cultural sort of it. So that's one, your project execution, your big picture thinking, right? All those things. Now on the technical side, even as an embedded engineer, just your skills in programming languages, right? Maybe you coded in C or C++, right? If you have been able to pick up a programming language in past and you have been able to do code in that really well, you'd be able to translate that into another programming language like Python, right? That's one. Your understanding of, let's say, data processing. If you have worked on projects where you have dealt with real-time data processing, this is going to be directly applicable to, let's say, handling and processing data in an ML context, right? I'd say mathematics and stats. If you have understanding of mathematics and stats, it's essential in both the fields. Okay? That's one bit. Second is, then when you will be preparing for interviews, you would sit down with career coaches, right? The way we have technical folks like ML engineers, ML engineering managers, data scientists teaching you technical side of it, we have technical recruiters from top tech companies who would help you understand that, hey, what are, like, if I was to work with you, then looking at companies where embedded software engineering and ML are combined, right? Maybe look at, let's say, something like NVIDIA, right? For graphics hardware, focuses on AI and ML technologies a lot, right? Or Qualcomm or Tesla, right? That's where how ML can be implemented within embedded software engineering as well, right? Maybe in on-device inference, right? Where you are deploying pre-trained ML models onto embedded devices, right? Or sensor data processing, anomaly detection, right? Predictive maintenance, right? So all those things, and you would get that sort of guidance while you're going through the curriculum. Sitting down with recruiters who are able to understand your profile, who are able to help you figure out that, hey, these are 12, 15, 20 companies that we can look at. These should be your primary targets. These should be your secondary targets. And then help you revamp your LinkedIn, your resume, your GitHub repository, your Kaggle profile, all of that. So that's one. Second, level of seniority, Amulya, it really depends. I'd say it does depend on your previous experience you're bringing in your tech stack, but it also depends a lot on how well you do in the interviews, right? I'd say you would go through anywhere between 4 to 7 rounds of interviews, right? And to take an example of, let's say, Google grades candidates on a scale of 1 to 4. So it's 1, 2, 2 plus 3 and 4, right? If all you've done is gotten grades of 3s and 4s, right? You would have more wiggle room, or I'd say companies would probably consider you for a higher level of seniority compared to someone who has not done that well in the interviews, right? So those things come into picture. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I have one more question. Like, so all this is great. Like, I do a ML switcher program and I have all the skills that I have acquired the skills. But when I actually apply for companies, usually they look for actual experience in a company, work experience, right? So this will be a certificate course, but what they will be looking is 1 year of experience in ML in a company, or 2 years of ML as an ML engineer. So how would I be able to attract the recruiters, or how does that work out?
Amulya, so that's, I'd say, first thing is the interview strategy, which I talked about. Like, how do we figure out what companies, what roles within those companies do we go about targeting? That's one. Second bit is then revamping our LinkedIn resume, all of that. And then third bit is the career services by Interview Kickstart. And that's where we are partnering up with companies to help our students. And most of the students that are coming to IK, right, they are backend engineers, full stack engineers, data engineers, DevOps engineers, embedded engineers, right, software engineering managers who want to pivot to machine learning as a domain. And we do understand that you would need help with top of the funnel interviews as well, right? And that's where we are partnering up with companies, and then we would promote your profile. Second bit is our 17,000 plus alumni network, and then that's our instructor network. So we would, but there are certain conditions, right? It's not that someone joins the Interview Kickstart switcher program, has 5% progress in that, and then they are expected to be, I'd say, given help on referral end, right? You have to complete at least 80% of the program. You have to do all the homework, the assignments, right? You have to complete all the mini projects, all the capstone projects. You have to do well in the mock interviews. And if we see all that effort from the student, we are going to help you with the top of the funnel interviews as well. We do understand, right? Most of the students are looking to pivot to that, pivot from a different domain to machine learning, and there would be guidance. What we are expecting is that you show up week in, week out, right? And you do everything that is expected of in the program.
So IK is going to help in figuring out what companies to apply and also helps in applying for those companies is
That's
what
correct.
you okay. Yeah. Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. I'll just move to
Great
next question. Yeah. Che.
Yeah.
Monica has raised her hand. Monica, you should be able to speak if you unmute yourself. How you doing?
Yeah, hi. I have put a question in Q&A as well. My question was really around, like, if you're prepping for EM, and would this switch-up program help us to be EM for ML, or this is just purely IC role? Like, how does it help for an EM? It's just, I wanted to understand.
Okay. Monica, so there as well, I'd say many things would like. Are you currently a frontline manager, which is usually L6, right? Or you are L7 or L8, right? Director of engineering. Those things would be pertinent. That's one. Second bit is, I'd say for people leadership roles, we are going to launch a different course soon. Okay. This course primary audience that I would folks whom I would recommend this course is they are in a developer role, right? Or I'd say an individual contributor role, and then they want to pivot to an individual contributor, machine learning or data science. Okay? If that's your career goal, then this is a bang on fit. Okay. EM courses, or I'd say engineering leadership role, again, it's not that it's not going to end up helping you. Some bit of it might end up becoming an overkill as well, Monica, right?
Yeah.
So that's there, right? Many engineering managers might not enjoy all the hands-on work that they would have to end up doing in the program. You would do a lot of coding, lot of hands-on development, right? So if you're not used to that, then that's there, right? So we would not want to set up incorrect expectations for the students, and that's why I'd say again, not saying that it's not going to be a fit. I have lots of engineering managers going through the program, but we have set up those expectations. Okay, while you're going through the program, you would doing end up doing lots of hands-on work, right? And if you're comfortable with that, feel free to take this up, and it would end up helping you, I'd say, serve your career goals, right? Your leadership skills, your people leadership, your business leadership, your growth leadership skills, right? Your ability to execute, those are not going to go away whether you are a software engineering manager or ML manager, right? Now, on top of that, you have acquired ML as a technical skill set, so you should be able to transition. But from the program's point of view, we have to set up correct expectations. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally. Thank you.
Awesome. Cheers.
So yeah, so maybe just to like add to that. So one of the things I see now, a change in the industry is they also expect engineering managers to become very hands-on. So actually, yeah, going through some of the assignments and kind of getting a deep knowledge may actually be good. But as Dashrath was saying, yeah, there's also the expectation of completing all the assignments and the time it takes. So you kind of have to like balance between the two. If you had a lot of time, I would say the course is still very useful.
Yeah, totally. So to me, where I'm looking for is like an EM role, but I have had a like EM level of experience. So it depends upon like nobody's gonna give me ML EM if I don't have the background or understanding. I do understand that, but I feel like this may or may not be an overkill when you're going through lots of these projects as a hands-on. So that's just, I wanted to get an understanding. Does this give an edge as an EM to give an overview and a background for an EM to be comfortable to be an EM for ML? Or is this like more of a totally like deep down living in code kind of a course?
Monica, so the curriculum is absolutely it's in-depth ML program,
Yeah,
right?
got it.
That's one. And the second bit is what I'm referring to is that it's not that you would be underprepared for a machine learning manager if you go through this program. You would absolutely be prepared. Okay? But then, as I said, you would end up doing a lot of hands-on work in the curriculum. Okay.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Cheers. Praveen, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have one question. So I know typically the machine learning engineers, right? Even I took some few from IK and try to see them in LinkedIn. Most of the people have either PhD or already have experience with some well-reputed company, and then they took the course and then they got to some one FAANG companies, right? So if somebody who's not having a PhD and not worked on the data science platforms, so can they manage it?
Okay. Praveen, so what I'm hearing is your concern is that, hey, I currently might be in a different domain. I do not have any ML experience, do not have any data science experience. Would I be able to go through the program and succeed?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah. And also whether PhDs and those are needed or still we can manage without PhDs.
So there are certain roles where absolutely, I'd say companies do prefer folks with PhD. Let's say you're going for a research scientist sort of role, right? And I think Jay can expand a bit more on that. That's where I'd say companies would prefer folks who have that, I'd say, research acumen, right? Someone who's going for a research scientist sort of role. That's there. But if you're looking at an ML engineering sort of role or a data scientist sort of role, it's not that you must have a PhD. That's not a requirement. Jay, do you see things to be different or that is the case?
Yeah. So I would totally agree. Like, yeah, if you're looking for a scientist role, and this was something I was also explaining in the deck, then typically majority of the places you may either need a PhD or like relevant experience you could talk about like in your past companies. But for ML engineer roles, like basically like in the end, it's all about like kind of clearing the interview. So as Dashath was saying, yeah, like if you apply to Google, if you clear like all the rounds with a score of 4, of course they're going to take you because that means that you have the right skills. So that's where this program would kind of make the big difference. Like it will help you do really well in the interviews, and that changes a lot of the decision making. So yeah, so for ML engineer roles, I mean, this program would help you do well in the interviews, and that would play a big part, even if you don't have like a lot of like past experience in industry. But yeah, if it's a scientist role, of course, like that's going to be different.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
That helps.
Praveen, to expand a bit more on that, right? And this is from conversations we have had with our instructors. And let me just share my screen and show you. I usually do this exercise with my students, and would suggest you do the same. Just go to LinkedIn and do this. It says software engineer machine learning, right? Try doing this exercise on your own. I just want to show you, I'd say, when we say that as software engineers, you already have lots of transferable skills, right? What that really means. I would just, I'd say, select states and let me just select a few of the top tech companies, right? And if you see, right, and try digging a bit deeper into the folks that are being shown on the screen, right? When you're doing this exercise on your own. Software engineer in ML, software engineer in ML, software engineer in ML, software engineer machine learning, software engineer machine learning. Safir is actually one of the alums. Software engineer in ML, right? And that's because I'd say you do have lots of skills that are directly transferable. If you're someone who's a back-end engineer, right? Or a full stack engineer, even a data engineer, cloud engineer, parts of things, right? A cloud engineer would have deployment, Kubernetes, Docker, that sort of things, right? Which is more pertinent, relevant towards MLOps, right? A back-end engineer would have design and development, just having the understanding of large scale design, architecture, how software systems work, right? Those skills are transferable, right? So you do have those transferable skills. And so the analogy that I try and give to my students is let's say you have a skill which is you can juggle 5 balls at once. Unique skill is, let's say, you can ride a unicycle. Okay, and but if you can, what you can do is, let's say, you can juggle 5 balls while riding a unicycle, right? That's a very rare skill set, and you put yourself in very unique position. So if you know software engineering, on top of that, you know machine learning, you have put yourself in a very unique position, right? And that opens up opportunities for you. And that's what the program would enable you to do, along with preparing you for any top tech interview that you walk into. Hope that helps.
So maybe also to add there, so these are all the technical skills, but there are also a lot of other skills you pick up in industry, like kind of communicating well with your partners, getting the right requirements, getting work done in time, working well in the team. Like all of the soft skills you also acquired in industry would transfer really well to the ML role. So that's also a place where like you have a lot of skills being in industry, working in a company, and those would transfer too.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Awesome. Sarath, you should be able to speak. Before we go to your question, Sarath, I just want to do a quick time check with Jay. Jay, are we good? I'm sure you would. I'd say it's about 8 p.m. Pacific. So by when do you want to wrap up the Q&A?
Yeah, I think I could still stay for till like 8:15 p.m. Maybe another 20 minutes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Sarath,
okay.
how are you doing? Maybe have a question, please.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So this is regarding the switcher program. I'm just trying to get a sense of how much time students typically spend outside the class. Like, you know, I from what I know, the classes are about 6 hours per week. Just curious, you know, like on average, how much time students spend outside that, doing assignments, doing projects. I'm just trying to get a sense of how intense is the program.
Yeah, sure. Sarath, so there are usually 2 live classes a week. Okay? One is on Sunday. That's for about 4 to 5 hours. Okay, and 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific are the times. And then once you're done with that class, you get homework, you get assignments, right? So you can absorb everything that you learned, do the practice, all of that. So rest of the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you typically work on homework assignments. And then on Thursday evening, the assignment review session happens. That's also for 2 hours. So that's 6 to 8 p.m. Pacific or 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern. So 6 hours you'll be spending in the classroom. And then apart from that, about, I'd say 4 to 6 hours, you can say, you'll be working on your own, right? Doing the homework assignments. You also have weekly coaching sessions. Let's say class is done, you're going through the homework or going through the recording, a doubt pops up, you can hop onto those coaching sessions and get your doubts clarified, right? So all of that is that, but about 10 to 12 hours on a weekly basis. Sarath.
Cool, thanks. Can I ask another question?
Sure, Sarath. Go ahead.
So after doing this switcher program, I saw in one of the slides where it was mentioned that one of the things that ML engineers do is, you know, read papers and apply. Do you think we'll be well equipped to understand papers after this program and apply?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Maybe I can take that. So one of the things we cover in the curriculum is like all the fundamentals. Like typically to read and understand a paper, you need to have enough like kind of math skills in like, let's say, linear algebra, statistics, and so on. So we do cover the basics. You may not have everything to read the paper, but you would at least know like what are the things you don't know, and then you could do a little bit of research in the internet to cover that. So basically, you would have the right foundation to read paper, and if you get stuck somewhere, kind of like do the right searching so that you can like understand the paper fully. So this course, along with doing some more kind of like Google searches for certain things you don't know, or maybe like reading a background paper, would kind of put you in a good place to read like most of the things. So this would be like the starting point. And then we also cover like some of the papers in the courses. So you could even like start by reading papers related to the ones we cover in the program and then continue with that. But yeah, you would definitely have the right background to get started.
Thank you.
Awesome. Amy, you have a question. You should be able to speak if you unmute yourself.
Hey, thanks for taking the question. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
So the question that I had was, and by the way, thanks Jay for amazing presentation. It helped filled up a lot of gaps that I had in my mind. So the question that I had was, let's say for example you are at a level, you're working as a backend engineer, or in your own domain you're working at a level, and then you go through the switch up course and you're ready for applications, right? And then you have maybe finalized few areas that you wanted to do these things, you wanted to apply. How would the, let's say from a company perspective, from let's say Apple or these big companies perspective, how would they look at the level? So let's say if a certain individual is doing a backend at let's say L4 or L5 or L3, and then when we are applying for, let's say a switch up graduate who is applying for the same level, would they be considered for that level, or would they be considered for a lower level because of the experience? Because of the obviously the switch up graduates won't have that much experience in the field, right? So
Great question, Amy. A couple of things, and Jay, feel free to add to things that I might miss out on. One is when you're interviewing with a large scale tech company, right? And when a recruiter reaches out to you, and I'm sure, right, many of you might already be working at one of those large scale tech companies. Recruiter does not reach out with a specific notion of that, hey, I'm reaching out only for L5 or L6 or L7 role, right? That's it. I'm going to hire for staff level and nothing else. That's never the case, right? They usually reach out for a range, let's say L4 to L6, right? Because they also do not have any idea on how well you would end up doing in the interviews, those four to 7 rounds of interviews, and that actually ends up deciding your level of seniority. So that's one. Recruiters would always reach out to you. They would look at, I'd say, they would have that initial conversation, would see that whether it's worth taking you through the on-site rounds or not. If they decide that, you go through those on-site rounds, and then the hiring committee decides. They sit together and decide on what level we take Amy at. That's one. Okay. Second bit, the I'd say seniority or pillars of any engineering roles, right? You would start with tech knowledge and experience. That's one bit. Then you add things like your big picture thinking, your project execution, your influence, okay? And then I'd say you top it off with, let's say, the impact that you have, right? What that means is, let's say big picture thinking. If you are a junior engineer, right? Let's say L3 or usually you are working with a local team, okay? And then you are working in sprints, right? You have that, hey, within next 15 days, maybe a month, maybe a quarter, what sort of impact I can make, right? So your big picture thinking is limited to that, right? Your execution, you're working with the local team and your influence, that scope is limited. You get to, let's say, a senior or a staff sort of level. You start looking at how I can make an impact in, let's say, next 6 months or 12 months, right? And then you start working with multiple teams, try and, I'd say, resolve blockers, challenges ahead of time. Okay? So now essentially the way you work has changed, right? And then if you get to more senior, right, senior staff or principal or distinguished sort of level, that's way beyond team level, right? Now here you are working with multiple departments. You are probably coming up with engineering roadmap for next 2, 3, 4 years, trying to prevent or take off blockers ahead of time, right? So in it's a simple notion. As you grow in an engineering career, you, let's say, at a senior staff or principal level, right? You have gone from building or developing software to developing teams that develop software, right? Or developing teams that build software, right? So that's essentially how your role changes. But the essentiality, right? You would still end up having at times to code, right? You would take critical decisions on design, architecture, and all of that, and that really is decided when you go through those 4 to 7 rounds of interviews, right? I mean, so hence we advise folks to have great foundations, have great work to show for in the interviews to talk about that with the hiring managers, but then you have to be equally prepared to do really well in those interviews. Yeah, Jay, anything that you would like to add, please?
Yeah. So that's a great answer. So maybe a couple of points to also add. That is like some of these projects you do like during the switch up course. Like maybe let's say you do a project with like large language models. Then you could actually present that like you have hands-on experience with in these projects. So that would be one way to cover maybe some of the like kind of experience in like industry which like you may be missing because of the switch up. So doing projects which are interesting, which you can actually talk during the interview, like that's really going to help. Also, the second point is also one of the ways in which these companies decide whether they should actually give you an offer at a staff level or a senior level. It's actually how well you do in, let's say, the system design or the ML system design rounds. So those are things, again, we cover a lot in the switch-up program. So yeah, even if you don't have a lot of like past experience, if you do really well, let's say in the system design rounds, then that would also kind of like tip the scales like in your favor. So we kind of make sure that everything we can cover from the interview point of view so that you do really well in the interview, that's all covered. And that would also help you kind of like get more senior roles or staff level roles.
Got it. So it's basically it's not just so because the reason I asked that question is because the number of so let's say as you grow or as your level grows, the number of system design interviews changes, right? So let's say if you're a very entry level engineer, then you might have one system design interview and 3 or 4 coding interviews. As you grow up, you might have few more. So does that? But so that was my question mainly for
yeah. So that's actually in your favor because the system design questions typically would be like a general problem to solve. Like maybe you want to build a ranking or recommendation system. Those are things we actually cover in the curriculum. So basically, if you actually have more system design question compared to a candidate who hasn't taken the switcher program, you are actually in a better like state to answer because like you would have better preparation of those type of problems. So by doing really well in the interviews, you can cover for, let's say, like some of the experience, which in your case, maybe in a different field in industry before.
Got it. Okay. Thanks for the answer, guys.
We would move on. Kyle, do you have a question? I think I'd say, Kyle, you had posted a couple of questions in the Q&A as well. But yeah, happy Wednesday. How are you doing?
Thank you. Good. Thanks. Thanks for hosting the conversation. My question was about, I posted it a few times, but I was wondering, Ajay, do you see a world where all of these like specialized data jobs, like data engineering, for example, consolidate to just a machine learning engineering role that knows all aspects of the data lifecycle? I guess I'm just selfishly, I'm a staff data engineer currently, but a little concerned that machine learning is, not just taking data engineering roles, but other types of roles. So I'm curious, like, I'm interested in machine learning as a way to skill up. So this is like a perfect opportunity for me, but I guess like as a professional in the industry, like how do you kind of see like all of these data jobs evolving?
Yep. That's a great question, Kyle. So yeah, so I would say like in big companies, I still feel like there would be separate specialists for all of these different roles, mostly because like they don't want like the same person to be doing everything. And then if they're hiring 10 people, it's actually more efficient to have like specialists, data engineers, specialists like annotation engineers, evaluation engineers, and so on. So yeah, at least in big tech companies, I don't expect all of them to collapse. But at the same time, as a candidate, your best bet is to like understand all of these different areas so that the number of jobs to which you can apply would increase. So if you know the basics of like all of these different roles, you could totally apply for like a data engineer role, an ML engineer role, maybe an MLOps engineer role. So that's where like in the curriculum, we actually covered like the basics of all of these different job titles. So yeah, I don't think that will like in the short term, we'll see the ML engineer doing all of the different stages in model development. But again, your best bet is like from a program like this is to like kind of get the fundamentals or all of them. That's why we kind of make sure that the curriculum covers like all the different aspects, all the way from like modeling, the different like application areas like NLP and computer vision, MLOps, data engineering, the SQL, all of those things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. But just a quick follow-up question. I know like is what I know like some of these cohorts are filling up. Do you know when the next one is that still has spots open?
Kyle, so actually initially when we started, we used to do only one cohort per month. But then due to the incoming volume, we had to, I'd say, started doing 2 cohorts per month, and those are filling up as well. So November, we are already wrapped up. I think early December is wrapped up, mid-December, and then Jan, we have a few slots. What I would suggest is just reach out to your program advisor, someone, right, from the team should be in touch with you. So reach out to them and they would help you out with, I'd say, getting started. Okay. Okay, thank you. That's there. And we have cohorts planned, like I have students, alums and new students enrolling like till June, July, August next year as well. So that's there. Okay. Just I would move on. Shyam, you should be able to speak quick. I'd say I think we have 4 more minutes. So let's take a few more questions and then we'll wrap up. Shyam, how are you doing? Please tell me, how can I help?
Yeah, actually, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, actually, yeah, my son has a question, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So go ahead, Anand.
Yes, I had a question about, so I'm already working in a company, but I'm not working in an AI role. But I was wondering about what should I consider doing to look into transferring from my current role within the company to one that does involve using machine learning and AI.
Yeah. Jess, so have you seen these sort of, I'd say, transitions? I know a bunch of students who have made these sort of transitions internally, but have you seen that? And what do you think? I'd say one would be acquiring those technical skills. If you want to work on AI, you have to acquire those technical skills. And then second is, I'd say, trying to I'd say, do that networking to open up those sort of opportunities as well, right? Having those sort of mentors as well. So what would you recommend?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say like a combination of the two. Like the most important part would be like getting the fundamentals so that you can actually clear the interviews. So that's where the switcher program would kind of get you with a solid like kind of fundamentals. Also like kind of getting a few mock interviews so that you can kind of like answer questions at the time when someone asks like new questions. So again, like the mocks we cover would be really useful. And then the other things would be like kind of the building the network. So again, like kind of this whole network of like instructors who are in all of these companies, like those are all gonna help. So yeah, I feel like you're at the right place. And then like this program would help you a lot to kind of grow and then switch to one of the ML engineer roles.
Thanks. I do have some of those skills. Like I have a certificate actually with a few AI courses from a grad school. So that's another thing I was wondering is what's the trade-off with going directly to AI roles or getting a master's degree first?
Yeah. So yeah, maybe I can take that too. So I guess like, of course, like when companies look at your resume, the master's degree would add some more points because like if you have a master's degree, that means that like you have spent more time in AI or machine learning. But in the end, pretty much all of your like the decision whether you get an offer and the level at which you're given the offer pretty much all depends on how you do in the interview. So basically, if you have like really strong fundamentals, like one of the questions people ask me a lot is like, should I go to like industry for ML roles or should I go do a PhD? And the typical answer I always give them is if you have the right skills and if your goal is to become an ML engineer in this industry, then of course like apply, do the interviews and then get the role. So of course like masters would add some points, but if you feel like you can actually, you already have the skills or maybe you miss some skills which you can actually cover through the switcher program, then I would say this would be the faster route that rather than like spending kind of 2 years in school. So yeah, so I would say like, yeah, if your final goal is to become an ML engineer, you have some of the skills now, there are a few things you're missing, then doing the switcher program would be a better and faster and cheaper way of getting there compared to like doing a master's for like 2 or 3 years.
Might sound a bit salesy, but yeah, do the switcher program. That's going to be and another way to look at it is see most of the research, the innovation that's happening it's to ML AI is still a nascent field, right? It's still in its infant phases, and the advantage that you would have with something like Interview Kickstart is you would get to work with, I'd say, folks like Jay, we have James. Every instructor is working on real world ML AI projects, right? And most of the innovation is being driven at companies like Apple or Amazon or Meta or Uber or OpenAI, these sort of companies, right? So and when you are being taught, being given feedback, being mentored by those sort of folks, that's going to play a lot to your advantage. So yeah, recommendation is that yeah, go with the Interview Kickstart switcher program. That's that. Okay. Jay, I think I'd say
16. Yeah.
I think lots of questions, lots of hands still raised. Folks, really, we wish we would have been able to answer each and every one of these questions, but just in interest of time, have to wrap up the session. Couple of things, folks. One is if you are looking to get started with your ML data science journey and you're looking at Interview Kickstart as one of the partners to help you with that. Talk to your program advisors. The way to do that is respond to any email in your inbox from Interview Kickstart. If you go to your program advisor, they would help you navigate through the details. Another one is and it's a shameless promotion, we are running certain spot scholarships for our batches till Feb. So if you're looking to get started by a batch till Feb, you might have some advantage. I'd say from a financial point of view as well. And your program advisors would help you out with those details. Okay. And apart from that, really appreciate, I think, you guys showing up, spending 90, 100, 120 minutes of your valuable time. Please reach out to us in case you have any further questions, and have a great rest of the evening. Take care. Bye-bye. Cheers, folks.
Thank you so much for all the questions. Bye, folks.
Yep. Cheers, folks.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.